Good morning, dear students. Welcome back to a YouTube class. So, from last two sessions, we started to study about your fundamentals of computer, that is, overview of computer chapter. So, in the last sessions, we were seeing on the topic characteristics of computer, which is also called as features of computers. So, we had studied in detail relating to all the characteristics of your computer. So, in the computer, we have totally 8 characteristics. The first one is speed, memory, storage, accuracy, versatility, automation, diligence, and cost effectiveness. So we had studied the meaning of each characteristics and how it works, how it affects your computers, that all things we had studied. So in today's sessions, we'll study relating to the next part of your computer, that is called as fundamental units of computer, which is also called as functional components of your computers, or else we can also call it as the block diagram of your computer. This question for your exam will be asked for 5 marks. Note down the point. The question will be asked in your theory exam for 5 marks. The question can be explain the block diagram of computer. In another way, they can ask is explain the fundamental units of your computer, and in another way they can ask the same question is explain the functional components of your computer. So in these way, 3 ways you will get the question, but the answer is same. So note down, the question carries for 5 marks. In your theory exam, you will get this question for 5 marks. So what is your fundamental units of your computer? What all are the functional components of your computer? What do you mean by the block diagram of your computer? What is there in that internally? That all we'll study now. So we'll see what all your functional components of your computer. Your functional components of your computer is based on which all the functions will be carried out by your computer. Your computer, basically any computer, is supposed to carry out some of the functions. What all those functions? The first function is it should accept the data and the program as input. When you want to perform any task, any operation in your computer, we should instruct the computer. We should advise the computer. That instructions may be in the format of data or maybe in the format of program. So the very first work of your computer, which is called as the function of computer, is the computer must and should accept the data and the program as input. Next, store data program and retrieve as and when required. What all the data and the program you had entered through your input devices, what all the data and the programs has given by the programmer or by the human being to the computer, that all should be stored in the memory or storage devices. It should be stored in the memory or in the storage devices. The next point they say is that retrieve as and when required. Here, retrieve as and when required means what all the data and the program are stored in your computer. If you want to read it, if you want to use it, when all you want to read it and when all you want to use it, that time we have to open it. We have to open those files, we have to open those programs, we have to execute those programs. That is called as retrieve. That is called as retrieve. Means the data is stored in your computer, we want to open that data, we want to use that data, and when it is required at that time, it should be available to opening the files. Done? So this is the second function we have it of your computer. Next, the third function of your computer says that the process the data as per instructions given by the program and convert it into useful information. What is your third function of your computer? Says that process the data as per the instructions. Process the data as per the instruction means what all the input is given by the program, what all the input is given by the human being, what data you entered, or what instructions you had given to the computer, that all work should be done, that all work should be carried out. That is called as process. For example, I want to calculate the simple interest. I want to calculate the simple interest. So what is the formula of simple interest? The simple interest formula is P into T into R whole divided by 100. What is this P? P is nothing but principal amount. T is nothing but for how many years you want to keep that amount. And R is nothing but the interest rate. So you have to get the value of this principal amount, you have to get the value of time and how many years that value, and even you have to get the value for interest rate. By taking all the values of this P, T and R, you have to multiply and you have to divide it by 100. So input what we are entering is, we are entering P value, T value and R value. So in computer it should process, means it should calculate. First it should multiply P value, T value and R value and then divide it by 100. So like that, what instructions you had given to the computers, in that way it should process it. In that way it should perform all the operations. So once you are done with your answer, you have to convert that into your useful information. Means the output what you will get after the procession, that means you are converting it into useful information. Done? So that is the third function of your computer. Next comes is the last one, that is communicate the information as output. As we are taking the data and the program as input, after the process, after the calculation or after performing your operations, we must and should display that result, which is called as the information as a output. For example, the same example we'll take, that is the simple interest calculation. We had given the value of PTR, that is nothing but your input. We stored it into the memory for a time being. Next in CPU, the value of SI has been calculated, that is simple interest. And what answer will come, that we have to display on your monitor screen, that is nothing but you communicate the information as output. Means if you will not get the answer, if you will not display the answer on your monitor screen, how the user will get to know that the computer is working or not? Done? So to know that all things, we must and should display the information as a output. Done? So these all the basic operations will be performed by your computer. As these all the operations are performed by the computer, based on these operations, that is the input, storage, process and the output, in the same way we have the block diagram of computer. We consider these operations, input, storing, process and the output. Based on that, we have the fundamental units of your computer, and using those fundamental units of your computer, we have the block diagram of computer. So we'll see what all the units will come in the block diagram, and which are also called as the basic fundamental units. So the computer is designed based on these 4 fundamental units, which are also called as basic units or the fundamental units. Don't get confused. And that block diagram is the diagram we'll see in the next slide. So which all are the basic 4 units, that is the fundamental units. The computer accepts the input, so input unit is there. It performs all the processing, all the calculation, all the operations in your CPU. So the second unit is central processing unit. The third one is it stores the data, so memory unit is there, and it displays the output, so output unit is there. Input unit is to accept the data. Central processing unit is to process the operations or your calculations on your input data. Then memory unit is nothing but to store the data or the information, and output is to display your processed information. Here control unit and arithmetic and logic unit are the part of your CPU. The CPU is again divided into 2 different parts. Those are control unit, and the second one is arithmetic and logical unit. So these all the points you have to write and explain when you are explaining the answer for your block diagram of computer or else for the fundamental units of your computer. Done? So the mainly are four: input unit, central processing unit, memory unit, output unit, and this control unit and arithmetic and logic unit are the part of your CPU. Done? So these all are the names of the units I had given. Now we'll see one after the other in detail. Okay, so before seeing the explanation for your basic units, first we'll see the diagram. In exam, suppose if you get the question for 5 marks, explain the block diagram of your computer or fundamental units of the computer. First you write down these units and then draw this diagram and then explain one after the other each point as I am taking the slides in this PPT. Okay, in the same way you go on explaining. Then, so this is the diagram which you have to refer to explain your block diagram of the computer. So this is your input unit. This is your storage unit, this is your CPU, and this is your output unit. The memory unit is also called as storage unit. Don't get confused, your memory unit is also called as storage unit. Fine, you can write storage unit or else you can refer it as memory unit also. You will not get any wrong answer. The answer is correct, you will get the marks. The marks will not be cut. Any word you can use. If you want, you can use the memory unit or else you can use the storage unit also. No issue. Done? So this is the block diagram of your computer. Input unit, memory unit or the storage unit. This is the CPU and this is the output. Fine. So what we do? Generally, I'll explain this diagram first, then we'll see each unit in detail later. Fine. So first, we'll enter the data or the program to your input unit. So this is the data coming into your input unit. Because using input devices like your keyboard, mouse and all, we always try to enter the data to your computers. So the first thing is the data is entered into your input unit. Through your input unit, the data is stored in your storage unit or into your memory unit. Okay, so the data can be stored in your secondary storage or in your primary storage. Okay, secondary storage means for a longer period of time we are storing the data so that we can use it for the future purpose also. Means ನೀವೇನು ಮಾಡತ್ತೀರಿ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಸ್ಟೋರೇಜ್ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ ಡೇಟಾ 1 ಮಂತ್ ನಂತರ ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ದಿವಸ ನಂತರ ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದೆರಡು ವರ್ಷ ಆದ ನಂತರನೂ ಬೇಕಾಗಿರ್ತದ ಪರ್ಮನೆಂಟ್ಲಿ ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಡೇಟಾ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ಸೆಕೆಂಡರಿ ಸ್ಟೋರೇಜ್ ಅಂತ. ಜಸ್ಟ್ ನಮಗೆ ಕ್ಯಾಲ್ಕುಲೇಷನ್ ಮುಗಿಸೋತನ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಡೇಟಾ ಸ್ಟೋರ್ ಮಾಡೋದಿತ್ತಂದ್ರೆ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿ ಸ್ಟೋರೇಜ್ ಹೋಗ್ತೀವಿ. Done? Understand the data which you want to store for permanently for a longer period of time, we have to store it in your secondary storage, and the data which you want to store for a time being temporarily, then we store it in your primary storage. Done? So after entering the data through your input unit, it will be there in your storage unit and then it will be sent to your CPU for the calculation purpose. It will be sent to your CPU for your calculation purpose. Done? So here it will come in your CPU, and if you want to perform any calculation, it will come to directly to ALU, not to CU. It will not send to your control unit. The data for the processing or to perform any operation or to do your calculation, it will send to your ALU, not to your CPU, because CPU will control all the functioning unit. CPU is there to control all these functioning unit, and to perform any task, to perform any calculation or to perform any operation, that work will be done by your ALU. So ALU is called as arithmetic and logical unit, means all arithmetic and logical related calculation will be done in your ALU. So just remember, CPU is again divided into two parts. One is your control unit, another one is your ALU. The control unit, it name itself tell you controlling, managing the work of input unit, the work of your memory, the work of your output unit and the work of your CPU. Everything is managed and controlled by your control unit. For that reason it is called as CU, that is control unit. Done? And the processing work, the operation work, the calculation work will be done by your ALU. Done? It is done by your ALU. Next, after the processing, again the data is sent back to your memory, and then through your memory it will send back to your output unit. And when the data which enters through your input, that time it will be data. After the processing, when we send it through your output unit, it will become the information. It will become your information. Then if you concentrate on your block diagram, we have two types of the connections. These lines are called as connections. These lines are called as connections. Then so we can see two types of the lines here. One is this dotted lines and another one is this straight lines without the dots. Correct, straight line. Done. So this dotted lines are called as control flow, and this exact lines which we can see, those are called as data flow. Those are called as data flow. So this control flow means CU will control all the units here. Means the data is coming from input or not, the data is sent it to CPU or not, after the calculation the data is sent to your storage unit or not, after data coming from your storage unit it has been sent to your ALU or not, and after the calculation the data is sent to your output or not. So the output unit, input unit and your storage unit are working properly or not, that all managing and all controlling is done by your control unit. So this connection dotted lines is there through your CU to everyone. To CU to input connection is there, to CU to your output connection is there, to CU to your storage is there, and to CU, that is to from control unit to your ALU also connection is there. Then next, so just remember this dotted line will help you to control the flow, the control of work. Okay, the other parts relating to your CU again we'll see in the next slides. Next we have is data flow. So how the data is flowing from one unit to another. First it will come from your input unit to your storage, then it will be there in your storage. If the data is there in your secondary storage, it will be sent to your primary, or if it is there in primary, if you want to store in your store it for your permanent longer period of time permanently, then it will be sent back again to your secondary storage. From your memory again the data can be come to your CPU for calculation. Once your calculation is done, then again it will be sent back to your storage unit, and after the calculation if you send to your storage, and from the storage it will send back again to your output, which will be the information. Done. So like this data is flowed from input to your storage, to storage to your CPU, from storage back again to your CPU, and from CPU to back again to your storage, and from storage to back to your output. Like this the data is flowed. So how the data is flowed, it is shown through this straight line is called as data flow. How the control is flowed, which is shown through these dotted lines. Fine. So that is called as control flow. So remember, while drawing the diagram in exam or in your notebook, where the dotted line connection is there and where the straight line connection is there. And one more thing you have to just concentrate in your diagram. For control flow there is no any arrow mark. Can you see these arrow marks? Okay, so these arrow marks are not there for these dotted lines. The arrow marks are there for only data flow. The arrow marks are there for only data flow. So here from input the data is coming, but from storage the data is not going back again to your input. That point you remember. From storage the data is going to your output, but from your output the data is not coming back to your storage. That point you have to remember. Okay, but from storage to CPU and from CPU to storage, both way is possible. That is, the data is coming also and the data is going also. Done. So both way communication is happening here, but from input to storage and from storage to output only one way communication is happening. Means the data can be taken from input to storage, but in reverse, from the storage to data, from the storage to input the data is not sent. And similarly the data can be sent from your storage to output, but from your output to storage the data is not sent back. Done. So that reverse connection is not there. How we have the reverse connection between your CPU and the storage unit, like that it is not there in between your input and storage unit and from your output and storage unit. So that way of the flow of the data and the control you have to remember. Fine. So here one way and two way communication is possible. For that reason we always show this arrow mark. Done. So here the control can be sent anyway, so there is no any arrow mark. There is no any arrow mark. Fine. That point you have to remember. So this is about your block diagram of computer, which I had explained in generally. Now we'll study in detail each unit. We'll study in detail about each unit. So the first unit we have is input unit. The first unit we have is input unit. So an input unit means it is about your input devices. Input unit means it is about your input devices. The hardware component which will help you to take the data or to enter the data into a computer system, those all the hardware components are called as your input devices. Those all are the hardware components are called as your input devices. So your computer need to receive the data and the instructions in order to solve a given problem. Any problem, if you want to solve it, any calculation you want to perform, or any operations you want to do it in your computer, then the computer must and should receive the data and the instructions from the users. Done? So this input unit perform these operations. For what purpose we use this input unit? The input unit will help you to receive the data and the instructions from the users so that we can solve the given problem. So here the input unit basically links the external world or the environment to your computer. So when all the human beings are existing in external world or the environment, from us the data should enter into your computer system, means there should be some media through which we have to link it. So which will link? The input unit will link this external environment or external world to your computer. Done? So how this input unit will work? The input unit consists one or more input devices, that is the hardware components, which will help you to enter the data, into your system. Those all the hardware components are called as your input devices. Okay, so the most common used input device is your keyboard and mouse. The most commonly used input device is your keyboard and the mouse. Then one more thing you have to keep in your mind, or you have to study about your input devices, is when we enter the data through your input devices, it may be through your keyboard and all, that data will be there in the English-like statements. That instructions will be there in your English-like statements, but your computer does not understand that English-like statements. Then what should be happen is, internally these English-like statements has to be converted into machine understandable language. Understand the data or the instructions which has been entered by the users, everything is in the format of English-like statements. Those all the English-like statements will not be understood by your machines, by your system. So internally it should be again converted into your machine understandable language. So that will be done again after entering the data. That is all about your input unit you have to remember. Done? So for what purpose we use input unit? The input unit is used to enter the data and the instructions from the users. It will help you to connect the external world and the environment to your computers. The hardware components using which we enter the data into your system is all called as your input devices, and keyboard and the mouse are most commonly used your input devices. That examples you can write it. Done? So this is all about your input devices. The next unit we'll see. The next unit we have is central processing unit. The next unit we have is central processing unit. So here central processing unit, in shortcut we call it as CPU. In shortcut we call it as CPU. So here the CPU is the part of your computer which will carries out the instructions of the computer. And in this unit only we execute all your tasks. We process all your tasks, means we'll perform all the operations which has been instructed by the user, by the human being. For that reason, this CPU is also called as brain of the computer. The CPU is also called as the brain of the computer. Then sometimes it is also called as heart, because it is the main part of your computer system, as like the heart of your human being. Then, so the most of the computers are identified by the type of the CPU it is present in them. Means when any human being, any people wants to purchase a new computer, then they all first see which CPU it is, which processor we have in that system. Based on that, we purchase the new computer. Done. So the main work of your CPU is, that is the main function of your CPU is to interpret the instructions in the program and execute them one by one. Interpret the instructions means what all the instructions are given by the user, it will take all, and one by one it will perform all the operations on that. It will perform all the tasks on that. Then, so as the computer is called as the brain of the, as your CPU is called as the brain of the computer, so all the major decisions, all the calculations will be done by your computer. Done. So here the your CPU is again divided into two parts. The one is called as CU and the another one is called as ALU. So here CU stands for control unit and ALU stands for arithmetic logic unit. CU stands for control unit and ALU stands for arithmetic logic unit. Now we'll see the CU and ALU, then we'll move to the next unit. So what do you mean by control unit? So this control unit will help you to control and direct the transfer of the program, instructions and data between various units. So when you want to use your computer, very first thing what do? We start giving the instructions. We start typing the program or we start transferring the data through your input devices. So when you start giving the data, CU will see whether the input unit is able to accept the data or not. After taking that data from the input unit, is it transferring it to storage unit or not? After the data is reached to your storage, the storage unit is transferring the data to CPU for calculation or not. Your ALU is performing the exact same calculation or not. After the calculation, the result is again sent back to your storage unit or not. Is it any disturbance? Why it is not sending? Is it sending it correctly? If it is sending it correctly, again after your central unit, after the output is sent back to your storage unit, from the storage unit again the data is sent back to your output devices or not. Which type of the output you are sending? If it is of text, image and all, it should be displayed on your monitor screen. If it is in the format of music, the speaker should start giving the sound. Like that, each work is properly functioning or not. The data is transferring from one unit to another unit or not. The ALU is performing correctly or not. The next information is sent again to through your input device. It should wait in your storage unit till the one work is done by your CPU. So these all activities, these all controlling and managing of tasks will be done by your control unit. Then, as the work of your college, everything is maintained by the principal, the head of the college. Similarly, here your CU will act like head of your system. It will see whether all the units are functioning properly or not. Is all the concepts are going well or not? Which device is not working? Everything maintained by your CPU. So it is called as control unit. So it is called as control unit. So the main activity is to maintain order and direct the operation of the entire system is done by your control unit. Then, as the CPU is part of your computer, it should perform all the controlling. So even though control unit is also the part of the CPU, the control unit is also part of the CPU, here calculation is not carried out. Only in ALU the calculation is carried. CU is used for only controlling. No, not a single simple calculation or operation is processed by your CPU. CU is there for only controlling. Any type of the processing, any type of the task, it may be the simple calculation or it may be a complex calculation. Everything is maintained by your ALU. Then, so this is about your control unit. Next we'll see about your ALU. So ALU stands for arithmetic and logic unit. ALU stands for arithmetic and logic unit. Here, the arithmetic and logic unit performs arithmetic and logic operations and control the speed of these operations. What it will do? It will perform all your arithmetic and logical operations. So what are all these arithmetic operations? The arithmetic operations are like addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. These all are called as arithmetic operations. Next, the logical operations are like and, or, not. Okay, so timing, you just remember the logical operators are and, or, not. How these logical operations work and all, I'll tell you in the live class, because I have to take the examples and it is not possible now. So I'll take the examples manually. I'll tell you how these logical operations work. Then, like relational operations also can be carried out. Relational operations means the comparison. For example, one number is greater than the another number or not. One number is less than another number or not. Is it equal or not? Like that, if you want to compare, those operations are called as relational operation. So any type of the operation or the calculation, everything is done and carried out here in your ALU. ALU stands for arithmetic and logical unit. Fine. So your CPU has to be explained with these two units, CU and ALU. Done. So we'll see next unit. The next unit we have is memory unit. The next unit we have is memory unit. So the data and the instructions required for your processing have to be stored in your memory unit before the actual processing part. So the connection was there. If you see this diagram, let me go back. So if you see this connection, when you enter the data through your input unit, the data is not directly sent to your CPU for the calculation. It is sent to your storage unit for the storing. Done? So there is a connection which all the instruction, the data or the program, you take it through your input unit. First it is sent to your storage. First it is sent to your storage, and through your storage then it is sent to your ALU. Why? Because what happens is sometimes the CPU is busy in performing some other work. The CPU is busy in performing some other work. So what happens here is the data is sent to your storage unit. When the CPU gets free, then the data is sent to your CPU. Okay. If CPU is performing any work, it should be wait here in your storage. Once your result is done, so directly you can send it to your output device. But if the output devices are busy in displaying or some other data, then timing it should wait here in your storage unit. For that reason, there is a connection between your storage to input, storage to output, and your CPU to output. Understand? So when all you want to store the data information, every time we use the help of these memory unit. Done? So the data and the instructions should be required for which all are required for processing has to be stored in your memory before using them. Done? In similar manner, the result generated after the processing has to be again preserved into your memory before displaying. The memory units thus provides the space to store input data, intermediate result and the final output generated. So here intermediate result means, I'll take the same example, that is your simple interest. Okay, so in simple interest we are doing two tasks. One is first we multiply p value, t value, r value. After multiplication, the answer which we'll get, then we divide it by 100. Fine. So before dividing the answer, we'll directly not divide it. We have to store somewhere, no, that answer. So that answer timingly stored again into your memory unit. That is called as intermediate result. Fine. So this is about your primary unit. This is about your memory unit. As I told you, the memory unit is also called as your storage unit, and it is divided into two parts that we had seen in the diagram. So which all those is a secondary storage and the primary storage. Here it is not there. So let me go back again. See the diagram. Your storage unit is again divided into two parts. One is called as secondary storage, another one is called as primary storage. So I'll tell you what you mean by secondary storage and primary storage. Relating in detail we'll see in the second chapter, but even though the terms are using here, I'll just give you the meaning. The memory can be stored in two ways. One is temporarily, another one is called as permanently. any memory which you are storing temporarily for a time being, then that is stored in your primary storage. The devices we use like RAM and all, registers, RAM and all. Then the memory which you want to store for a longer period of time permanently, so that in future when all we need we can use it, such memory are called as storage memory. Such memory is called as your secondary storage. Then so temporary memory is your primary storage and permanent memory is your secondary storage. So the examples of your secondary storage devices are your hard disk, floppy disk, and the other magnetic disk and all. Done. So here we have the examples. Secondary storage devices are your additional memory like floppy disk, magnetic tape, hard disk. Compact disk means CD, DVD means your digital versatile disk. These all are called as your secondary storage devices. Then, so you have to note down one point, that is the input unit, an output unit and a secondary storage devices are togetherly called as peripheral devices. Understand? Input unit, output unit and secondary storage devices, these all are called as peripheral devices. Then note this point. You may get a question for 1 marks. What all are the peripheral devices? The peripheral devices are your input devices, output devices and secondary storage devices. Then next we'll study the last unit of your block diagram, that is your output unit. The last unit of your block diagram is your output unit. So for what purpose we use output unit is, it is used to print or display the result which is stored in your memory unit. It is used to print or display the result or the information which is stored in your memory unit. The actual function of your output unit is just to reverse of your input unit. What we do in your input unit? In your input unit, we take the data from the outside world and we enter it into your computer system, means inside. But here what we do is we take the data from the system and we give it to the external world. Then, so thus the output unit links the computer to your outside world. So in input, the data is coming from outside world to your computer, and here in your output unit, the data is going out from your computer to outside work. That is the difference. We can have it in your output unit. Then, so the most commonly used output devices are monitor and the printer. The most commonly used output devices are monitor and the printer. Then, as I told you one point, that the data or the instructions or the program which you enter through your input devices to your system is all in English like statements, and you have to convert them into your machine understandable language so that the computer can know what you are telling. Done. Now here till after the processing, means it will go to your memory, then it will come to your ALU, it will perform all the information, then it will send to your storage for storing. Okay, so till here the data is there in the machine understandable language. Now if same is displayed on your monitor screen, can you able to read it? No, because we understand only English like statements. So what we have to do here in your output unit is, the data which has converted into machine understandable language again has to be converted back to your English like statements, and then it should be displayed on your monitor screen, or it should be printed through your printer. Done. So as the data from your input unit has to be converted into machine language, similarly here before displaying or before printing through your output devices, it should be again converted back through your into your human being understandable language. Done. So this is all about your block diagram of your computer. Totally here in your block diagram we have mainly 4 fundamental units. The one is input unit, the another one is storage unit, and then the CPU, and then the output unit. Understand the function of each unit. Input unit is used to accept the data, storage unit is used to store the data, and your CPU is used to perform 2 functions. One is controlling, another one is calculation, and your output unit is used to display or to print the processed information or the result. Done. So this question in exam will be asked for you for 5 marks. So read it properly, write down all the points and prepare your notes. If you have any doubts, let me know. I'll explain your doubts. Done. The other points relating to your overview of the computer we'll see in the next class. Thank you.